Right. No doubt, if you're listening to this vid, you've heard of Kingdom Security, a private security firm offering services to various councils around the country, and they've made a name for themselves for all sorts of criminal and illegal activities by their goons, and all these crimes and such like are being covered up by the councils contracting them so that they can all earn a few quid. So what should you do if you are approached by a Kingdom security officer, as I say, aka goon, and accused of an environmental crime? Well, there are several answers to that question, depending on the circumstances, of course. I must say at this point, though, if you've genuinely committed the offence, then you should take it on the chin and pay the penalty if you're caught. If you've deliberately flouted the law and littered or let your dog foul a pavement or public space, etc., and you've got no intention of rectifying that yourself, you were just going to abandon the waste, the mess, then quite frankly you deserve the penalty. And to be honest, the penalty should be larger than what it currently is. There's an average of about 75 quid, and even at this moment in time there are plans to increase it, which makes my interest in Kingdom Security even greater, because they're taking the bulk of the money and the councils are only getting a small cut, as little as 5% in some cases. I'd never support an increased penalty while the likes of Kingdom Security is allowed to terrorise mostly innocent people so they can make vast profits and the goons can make useful bonuses. They're all incentivised, and although I've said I'd like to see higher penalties for the people who do flout the law, again I wouldn't support that increase because of the abuse that Kingdom Security is inflicting upon ordinary people in their lust for profit. I mean, as an individual, I support the death penalty, but I never support its reintroduction because it's then wide open to abuse, and once it's in, it's quite difficult to get rid of. And that's mirrored with Kingdom Security. Councils have contracted the company, and wide-scale abuse and malpractice is being foisted on the UK public. And it is this which I and thousands of good people are fed up with. Kingdom Security ripping off hundreds of people every day somewhere in the UK. And I say ripped off because most are actually innocent in some way. And if they're being penalised, they're being ripped off. If, however, you've, let's say, dropped a piece of paper by accident or dropped a fag butt on the floor, is in order to stand on to put it out, something people have done for generations, or you've not had time to pull your dog poo bag out of your pocket as your dog's dropping one on the pavement. It's often an innocent situation like that when a Kingdom Security goon will pounce, not waiting for the outcome of what he's seeing before him, because if you rectify it, no offence is actually committed. So what they do, they'll rush in and accuse you of doing wrong before you've actually completed whatever it is you were going to do. So say dropping your fag butt on the floor to put your foot on it. And now some people will just put the foot on it and leave it. But if you're one of those responsible people who put your foot on it to extinguish it and then picks it up to put it in your pocket or put it in a litter bin, then that's fine. But that won't stop Kingdom Security. They'll see you stand on that fag butt, and before you can bend down to pick it up, they'll be on you like a rash, and they'll be accusing you of abandoning the fag butt. Now, of course, you haven't abandoned it, of course, and at the point of them actually having a pop at you, their little cameras they got, their little body cameras, they're rolling and they're recording this. So it's quite important about how you deal with that, because one wrong word and they'll interpret that as an admission, and you'll find it quite difficult to shed the fixed penalty notice if you try to appeal it. It's not in anyone's interest to cancel and appeal FPN. The councils want your cash, Kingdom Security wants your cash. They're all in it together. Many people believe that the council officers who are employing and recommending these contracts are taking bungs anyway. So they're all in together, and none of them can be trusted. Anyway, there's some examples. But these Kingdom Security guys, most of them are psychopaths. They're very low intelligence, low IQ, poor qualifications if any. They can barely read and write their own names. They can barely grunt in English, or in Welsh for that matter, if you're in Wales. They're the lower end of the social and intellectual scale, and these are the sort of jobs that they're only capable of doing. So, and if they had any moral compass about them, they just wouldn't even be doing the jobs. It's a particularly desperate person or a particularly sadistic person who takes a job with the likes of Kingdom Security. But there are sadists amongst them. You can see the delight and the glee in some of the faces when they've just issued a fixed penalty notice to some 90-year-old biddy who can barely see and doesn't even know she dropped a piece of paper on the floor. You can see them drooling over the money, and they are really sick people. But Kingdom Security, they'll lap them up. I've been told recently that they're not doing very well in the employment stakes. People are getting wise, and they know it's shameful to work for the company. No one in the right mind would do it. But there's a hardcore of Kingdom employees, particularly in North Wales, where they're a bit of a problem. And this hardcore, they are, well, the only way to describe them is psychopaths. They drool over their FPNs. They'll nick their own mothers. Babies have dropped litter out of prams, and they've tried to terrorise the mothers into accepting FPNs, because the baby, of course, can't be prosecuted. If they could, they would prosecute the babies. You know, such as the psychotic scumbags they are like. But depending on where you are in Britain, there are guidelines of sorts, and of course there's legislation which determines how these morons should act. But Kingdom Security doesn't worry about a little obstacle like the law in order to issue a fixed penalty notice. Remember, Kingdom Security as a company derives substantial income from fixed penalty notices, these FPNs. So there's an immediate financial incentive to issue as many as possible and raise revenue. And straight away the system there is flawed. The last thing Kingdom Security needs is a clean, tidy, responsible public. There's no money in that. So to generate income, in most cases, Kingdom Security simply invents a crime and tries to frame an innocent person, because the vast majority of people are responsible. They put the litter in bins. If they drop something, it's accidental. Most people who walk on the dogs pick up the dog poo, and they'll drop the poo bag in a bin. But because of the lean pickings amongst the more irresponsible people, Kingdom Security can't be everywhere at once. They're never going to make any money catching genuine offenders. So they pick on innocent people, and the flaws in the system allow them to frame people, fit them up, accuse them of crimes they simply haven't done. And then you've got bank councils contracting them who will back them up as best they can. It comes as no surprise, therefore, that the few valiant people who say, I'm not having it, and I'm going to court, because they do try to threaten you with court action, and they try to psychologically wear you down. Oh, if you take this to court, you can have a £2,500 fine and a criminal record and all this. But the reality is, the vast majority of court cases involving appeals or about fixed penalty notices issued by Kingdom Security scumbags are thrown out of court, and substantial numbers are actually withdrawn before they even get to court. You appeal it, they say no, you say right, I'm going to court, and they'll leave it right up to the last minute and then pull the case. It'll be the subject of another little video, but there's a contentious issue over the legality of issuing fixed penalty notices on private land. And I've studied this now, and repeatedly, over and over and over, anyone who is issued with a fixed penalty notice on private land who says they're going to court can pretty much guarantee that FPN will be cancelled on appeal to the council, or it will be pulled, because as I say, I'll explain elsewhere in another vid, but the issuing of fixed penalty notices on private land is, as far as I'm concerned, unlawful. I've found out now how they're getting around it, and I can explain that, but they're unlawful without prior landowner consent. The legislation clearly states that they lose their statutory powers, so they can't enter land. They can go enter land and see you commit an offence, but they can't actually approach you about it on that land. It's still an offence to litter, but they then have to sort of find your details somehow and issue the FPN that way, but they can't do it on the land. And as it would be unlawful because they haven't got the prior landowner consent. Councils always dispute this, Kingdom Security dispute it, but as I say, I've got it sussed out now, and that'll be in another vid. But nonetheless, if these guidelines and legislation was followed, accidental littering, for instance, people would never be caught for accidental littering. They'd follow guidelines where applicable, or they'd use the common sense. Now, we've already said these guys and girls, some of them, it's debatable whether they look like girls, who work for Kingdom Security, they're not the sharpest tools in the box. They're incapable of rationalisation, and as I say, they can barely read and write their own names. All they understand is money. So they'll lie, cheat and steal to get those FPNs issued. But say if the guidelines were followed, everyone would be treated fairly, but they're not. And as a consequence, accidental littering is punished, and in the absence of that, innocent people are punished because they just simply make up the crimes. But this idiotic and public relations disaster policy has resulted in thousands of innocent people being victimised by Kingdom Security thugs. They employ a range of tactics to threaten and intimidate people into paying up, often for something they just simply haven't done. Such is the mentality of these feral bullies. So that's something that needs to be dealt with. Assuming you haven't actually committed an offence under the Environmental Protection Act 1990, which is what they whinge about most, but you're still approached in a public place, you can deploy your legal right to silence. If you choose this particular route, then you must not give in until the Kingdom Security goons have cleared off. This is quite important. Your right to silence supersedes anything that they can accuse you of. If they approach you, they'll start filming at that point. on their little body cameras. They don't record the alleged offence because of data protection. It's something to do with surveillance. So it's very easy for these vermin to make up an offence. They're under no obligation to actually provide the evidence. They only have to say, I saw you smoking. Of course, they've been caught out many times. They've accused smokers of smoking, and it turns out that they vape, or they don't smoke at all. And what they've accused them of is a blatant lie. But every now and then they do get caught out by that. As I say, once they approach you, they'll start filming. The whole point of them filming you and recording what you say is to try and get some sort of confession, something that will back up what they accuse you of. So essentially, anything you might say on camera could be used against you. In a similar way, the police, proper law enforcement people, of course, the police, they advise that this, anything you say might be used in evidence, sort of thing. So you have to be careful what you say. But these scumbags, they'll twist and turn and manipulate anything to try and make you look guilty. But if they come up to you, the recording, it's important to get on that recording a statement. And all you need to say is, I'm exercising my right to silence. I've committed no offence and have nothing more to say. Then stay silent. If you engage in conversation with these idiots, you can end up in a lot of trouble. As I said before, they're not very bright. They're only really proto-humans. They're not real human beings, or they'd have a conscience. But engage them at your peril. If you're really confident and you know what to say, then go ahead, give them hell. But for the average person who's caught out in the street, they're caught off guard. They get a fleeting glimpse of some half-hearted ID they flash, because often these people aren't even in uniform properly. Their ID isn't on display. But people have this nasty habit of saying, oh, someone in a uniform, they've got some authority over me. No one's got authority over you. Not even the police have got authority over you. They can't even get your name and address, the police, unless they arrest you. So it's not an offence if a cop ever tells you, you have to give me your name and address. It's bollocks. It only becomes unlawful not to cooperate with the police in that respect when you've committed a crime, or they suspect you of a crime, and they've arrested you for it. And these wannabe gangster stroke pseudo policemen, they're just a waste of space. If you're going to be told off wrongly by a law enforcement officer, at least be told off wrongly by a police officer who took an oath when they became the police to serve the public. Anyway, I say all you do is say, I want to remain silent. I've got nothing to say, and stay quiet. Under the Environmental Protection Act 1990, the Kingdom Security Goons are empowered, and this is a quirk in the law, they are empowered to demand your details, your name and address, in order to issue a fixed penalty notice. Even the police haven't got that power, but it is in that particular law. It's also a further offence to give false details. And we'll come back to that false detail bit a bit later. However, you can bypass all this without any fuss, without any fear of repercussion, by claiming your right to silence. If by remaining silent, you're not refusing to give your details, you avoid the issue altogether. It's a bit like the tax laws. Avoidance is legal, but dodging tax is illegal. So all these corporations and all that, who don't pay their tax, they avoid it legally. And ordinary people can do that. But in the case of like these kingdom security tossers, like, you can remain silent, and your right to silence supersedes everything. So just stay silent. If you say and argue with them, I'm not giving you my name and address, and that'll be recorded, and that is a refusal, and they can use that against you. They'll say, oh, you committed an offence because you refused to give your details. Remaining silent gets round that. You're not refusing to give the details, you're just remaining silent. There's a big difference. Anyway, if the goon or the goons, because they like to operate in twos so they can kettle people into a corner and spread eagle themselves and put their arms against a wall so that they sort of imprison a victim against a wall. All totally illegal, of course, but they do it all the time. If these goons then act to subvert your silence, then they start to act unlawfully themselves. And of course they'll be recording their own crimes at that point. Breach of the peace springs to mind. It's one of the laws that could be broken. They'll keep on at you. They might persist, impressing you, talking away to you, but ideally they should retreat, because you've told them once you're not going to talk to them, and that should be good enough, because it's pointless them carrying on because you're not going to talk to them. Anyone who's smart enough to say and stand up to them and say, I'm not going to talk to you, as thick as they are, they should realise that someone who's going to say that is not going to give in as a rule, and it's just not worth the time and effort to keep on at you. So they should retreat. But you've got to be careful, because the slimy little gits, like, and they won't want to miss out on their fixed penalty notices and their bonuses and all that sort of stuff. So they may follow you. They may even talk to you and nag at you as they're walking along, but they may follow you. So it's important not to walk back to your car if you have one, or it's important not to walk home, because if they're still following you, what they'll do is they'll find a car that you're getting into, obviously if you're in the driver's seat, and they'll start to gather intelligence to try and identify you. They can go to DVLA and access the DVLA database, and they may even try and follow you home. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. Say there's no level to which these scumbags won't stoop to try and get you. They may follow you home, and if they find out where you live, or they can match that registration number to you or a property where they think you are, they'll issue an FPN. But on that fixed penalty notice, they can write anything they want. It should really match what they've said on camera, because it's the same offence. But they can add so much more to it, you know, and they will, because they're just compulsive liars. They're corrupt, they're evil, sadistic. They're just criminals, pretending they're not, and everyone else is a criminal for accidentally dropping a sweet wrapper. But this is the sort of psychotic tossers they are, like. But anyways, you have to be careful with that one. But if you have a confrontation with them, just remember that they're only the slime off the bottom of a pond, the pond dwellers. Walk away, say nothing, go and have a coffee somewhere. They may even follow you into a shop or something. They're actually allowed to do that, but just ignore them. There's nothing they can do. It'll become uneconomic after them after about 30 minutes, 45 minutes. As while they're looking at you and hassling you, of course, they aren't looking elsewhere for anyone else. So they're losing money all the time. So they will give up. I'm in North Wales, and these kingdom security thugs are quite prevalent, making a nuisance of themselves everywhere. But it's not unknown for them to follow car drivers home, trying to find out where they live. But they're nearly always lone female drivers, and of course these cars normally have two blokes in them. So you can imagine what that must be like for a woman if she's aware that she's being followed. I mean, there's only a hair's breadth between the law saying that these people can't tase you or sexually assault you in their attempts to try and get information and issue those FPNs. But trust me, if the law allowed it, they'd be beating people on the floor with sticks, kicking them in the head and everything. And you can just imagine them shouting at you, give us your details, you know, as they sort of batter you with a piece of wood like. But these are the sort of people who they are. They're just thugs. And say anyone who works for them, anyone who works with them or knows them or even drinks with them, they should be ashamed of themselves. The mothers should be ashamed of even spawning these scumbags. And I'm sure the mothers are very proud of them. I'm being sarcastic now. For some of the things they do in life. Anyway, if they follow you a lot, if you follow you, just ring the police, because that's harassment. They're not supposed to do it. Anyone with any degree of moral compass just wouldn't do it anyway. You know, a decent person, if they were on the street with a lone woman, you'd probably cross over the other side of the road, not just to make her feel a bit better that you're not walking behind her, you know. But these people, they're just getting off on it, like. And they really, really want putting down some of them. But that's what they do with in their attempts to get an FPN issued. But this is all about countering them, and the advice I'm given will deter them and disrupt them, and hopefully if you are confronted by them, you won't get issued with one. When you don't cooperate with these clowns, they obviously think they're entitled to look down on you, and you should do what they say. When of course it's they're acting on behalf of a public body, the council, and it's them who should be asking how high when you tell them to jump. However, one of the things they do, one of the tactics they use to try and intimidate people into cooperating and accepting the FPN, is they threaten to get the police. It's a bit of a contentious issue. From my experiences in North Wales, this tactic is used often, but more often than not, especially if this doesn't matter if there's one or two of them, people start arguing with them. They say, I'm not giving you my details, and they say, well, we're calling the police. And one of them may sort of slide off and make out that they're calling the police. In about 99 times out of 100, they're only making out they're ringing the police. The police have got better things to do to be getting called out to trivial stuff like this, which has got nothing really to do with the police. So they make out, they pretend they're ringing the police to try and get you to give in, and they come out with all sorts of crap about if you go to court, you know, you could end up with a criminal record if you haven't got one already. You could be fined £2,500. They just lay it on. They're just trying to wear people down all the time and make them think that even if you haven't done anything wrong, they stand accused, and it's cheaper just to pay the 75 quid to get them off the back. But of course that's totally unacceptable. You shouldn't worry about them claiming to ring the police, because as I say, 99 times out of 100 they don't anyway. But there are several YouTube videos which you can always refer the police to if they ever get involved, showing how the police have turned up at the behest of Kingdom Security, and in most cases, if not nearly all of them, they turn up for no good reason at all. But the police are a bit of an odd bunch, really. We all depend on them and all this, and people have criticisms of them, especially if they've been on the wrong side of the law. And the police, some of the police aren't angels, of course. Some of them are just as bad as these Kingdom morons. But by and large, the vast majority of them are okay, and they're just doing a day's work. But people often mistakenly believe that the police know the law, and the police don't really know the law. They know some law very well, and law is for lawyers, not the police, of course. And the police are just susceptible to old wives' tales and misperceptions about the law as anybody else. But I say these kingdom security are quite happy in most cases to tackle kids and old age pensioners, the mentally and physically disabled, lone women, anyone who they think won't fight back. They're the ones they target. They'll deny they ever do target them, but they do target them. And occasionally people will fight back and defend themselves and just say, I'm just not having this bullshit that you're trying to lay on me, you know. So every now and then they pretend they're getting the cops, but every now and again, in the very rare cases, they do ring the police, and in rarer cases again, the police actually turn up. You know, for well, if your house gets burgled these days, it can take a week for the police to turn up, so that, like, depending on which part of the country you're in. But when they turn up, it's a bit of a mixed bag, because as I say, most police officers don't know the law. And on YouTube, for instance, you'll see police officers ringing in, talking to the superiors what they would do, you know. And people higher up to the chain, as it were, the chain of command, they expect them to know a little bit more than the ones lower down. And more often than not, the superiors tell them not to get involved. But one of the things about when the police turn up is they're not consistent. And if they don't turn up, I mean, it's nothing to be worried about. Invariably, the police officers ask you, well, just give you details to the Kingdom Security goon because you committed an offence. Well, you haven't committed an offence because A, you might not have committed an offence, and B, the police can't say that because they haven't seen you commit the offence. They're going on hearsay. And these people haven't even got any evidence that you've committed an offence other than what they say. And the issue of them calling the police is actually all about you refusing to give you details, because they think the police will intimidate you into handing over that information. But the police can't ask you to give your information, your details to Kingdom Security. They're well outside the remit. The other thing is, the police officers themselves haven't got the power to ask you for your name and address anyway. They can't do that in normal circumstances when it's a police matter. Unless they suspect you of committing an offence and arrest you for it, they can ask you for your name and address till the cows come home. You don't have to give it to them, and there's nothing they can do about it. There are cases known where unenlightened police officers have got the details off an accused person, someone accused by Kingdom Security, and then have gone to Kingdom Security and give them the details. Well, that's actually blatantly illegal. It's a breach of the Data Protection Act. When you give confidential information to the police, it is confidential, and it's not the police's job to give it to third-party corporate entities. And I mean, those cases are very, very rare. But of course, at the end of the day, if the police turn up again, you can just say, well, I've got nothing to say. I've told them I'm remaining silent, and I'm staying silent. But the police cannot compel you to give your details to these people. It's an offence not to give your details to these people. And of course, if you refuse, and they've got that recorded, you could be on sticky ground. So, as I said earlier, it's best not to get mixed up with them. But the police can also serve another purpose, because if you're in an argumentative situation with these thugs, there's the possibility that it could always escalate into something nasty. So the police are there to sort of also calm things down, make sure there's no breach of the peace. But under no circumstances whatsoever, if the police do turn up, can they get involved to the point where you are forced to give your details to Kingdom Security. The police just haven't got that power. And if it transpired that a police officer did try to coerce you into giving it You could just whack up a complaint against that particular officer. And if they're told you'll complain about them and they don't back down, they deserve to have the complaint laid against them. But say they have no good real reason to turn up. The other thing, of course, is as soon as Kingdom Security approach you, whether the police are involved or not, they wouldn't be at that stage anyway, but as soon as Kingdom Security approach you, they're recording you, whip out your phone and start recording them. They hate it. Some of them will even say, oh, you can't film me, or you can't do this, you can't do that. These people are in a public place and they are working on behalf of a public body. They've got no protection in law. You can film them anytime you want. You can take pictures of them. You can say cheese, smile for the camera, say cheese, whatever you want. If they try to touch your camera, your device or whatever, you know, it's a criminal damage thing. If they touch you, of course, it's an assault. They don't like you recording because you then have roughly a copy of what they're recording, and of course they can't manipulate the evidence then. And there's plenty of videos on YouTube of even policemen, security men, all sorts of things saying don't film me, and they've got no power to stop you. I mean, they can ask you and say don't do this, but the police should know better. Every policeman should know that a member of the public, except in the rarest of circumstances involved with terrorism, members of the public can film the police. You're only allowed not to film them if what you're doing might prejudice an investigation type thing. But it's for the most serious cases. Let's say we're getting into the realms of terrorism then. But then, speaking of terrorism, Kingdom Security know all about terrorism. Say they'll stop at nothing to issue those fixed penalty notices. So get those cameras out and film them every step of the way, and give them no leeway, because they won't give it to you. On the subject of being approached still, the Kingdom Security goons working in that job, what they're actually doing, any two-bit psychologist will tell you, is they're acting out their fantasies, and they're on a power trip. They think they've got some sort of power, and this is what they do. They get off on it. They think, oh, I can say this to you, I can do this to you, blah blah blah. And it all in all, it fits in with their mindset. It fits in with people with the lowest IQs in society, things like that. I say they're not very bright. They like to refer to their chit chat with a victim and say, we're going to give it a caution, like the police officers when they tell you they're going to give you a fixed penalty notice. They refer to it as a caution, and that about sums them up for what sort of mentality these clowns have got. Like the cautions, it's not worth anything, and they can only be giving you a caution anyway if you've cooperated with them and said something incriminating. As I say, I'll go back to the very first part of this video clip. Just remain silent, give them nothing, and they'll just say, well, we've seen you've committed an offence. They don't film that. It's your word against theirs, you know. And the other thing is, of course, is they've got no power to detain you. So the peculiar thing is, when a Kingdom Security lunatic comes up to you and tries to stop you, to state that he's just seen you commit an offence, as it were, he can't actually stop you in the street. The law allows him to pursue the matter of fact that you might have committed an offence, but the law doesn't give them the power to stop you. So you can just keep on walking, and he can talk to you all he wants, but he'll have to do it while he's walking. He can be as polite as he wants, say, oh, excuse me sir, excuse me madam, I'm Kingdom Security working on behalf of the council, whatever crap they come out with, and I've just seen you commit an offence under section whatever, the Environmental Protection Act 1990, and I must caution you that I'm going to give you a fixed penalty notice. Just carry on walking. They can't stop you. They can't get in front of you and try and waylay you. They do. It's happened lots of times where two of them will try and get someone against a wall, and they'll stand either side of them. So in order for that person to then break free, he or she would have to literally force the way between them. And of course they are falsely detaining you because they got no authority to do that. So again, if it ever happens to you, kick up a fuss, get it into your appeal. But of course, again, you may not have to appeal if you don't say anything. But at the end of the day, these are people who can just barely grunt and say they've got low IQs, and they have to talk to normally civilised people and look at them like they're in the wrong, and somehow they're lower than them. But that's just simply not the case. But say the Lord allows them to ask for your details, but the Lord doesn't allow them to stop you and ask you. And you can exploit all this to your own sort of ends. So if you sorry to sound flippant, but if you're silly enough to give them your details, they will ask for your ID to confirm what you say. Again, they don't have this power. They can ask, but you can just refuse. They've got no legal power whatsoever to ask for any confirmation of who you say you are. So you tell them you're Joe Bloggs and you live at X whatever street in X town. Now, it's very common. They do say, have you got anything to verify that? And most people just say, oh, do you pull a bank card out or something? You're giving these third-party psychopaths access to confidential information. I mean, they may even photograph your bloody your bank card. You just don't give them this information, and there's no law which says you have to comply. There's no law which allows them to ask. It's not enshrined in law. They do ask, and they hope that someone cooperates and pulls out some sort of ID that verifies what name and address you've just said. But it's not legal. The onus is on them to establish who you are. The onus is not on you to help them establish who you are. And there's a very, very important difference. So if you are unfortunate enough to be stopped by them and it gets that far, and if you're going to issue the FPN and they've asked you what your name and address is, you say you're Joe Soap or Joe Bloggs or whatever. If they say to you, can you prove it? Say, no, you prove it. Because they say the onus is on them. And that's the way it is. They don't like it, but if you know these little tips, use them against them, and at all times film them while it's going on. So in a bit of a recap of some of the points I've covered, it's not exhausted by any stretch of the imagination. There's loads of things you could say, but too much information in one go sort of burns everyone's brains out. So I'm just going to give these snippets in a series of short video clips, share my knowledge as it were, and hopefully save yourself £75 or more to not being extorted by these maniacs. But in the first instance, if you're approached, remain silent. That's the ideal thing. Ideally remain silent, other than perhaps telling them, I'm reserving my right to silence and I've got nothing to say. You are exercising your right to remain silent, and that supersedes anything they can possibly say to you, and it does not incriminate you either. Without your sort of cooperation on film, your bit of a confession as a way to back up what they've said, they've got nothing, and it can go no further. If you're approached, immediately pull your phone out or any other device that's capable of filming and start filming them. And ideally, if you object to it, get that on film as well. They can't stop you. If you're going to remain silent, just walk away. Almost treat them like they're not there, you know. There's a buzzing noise in your ears where they're whining and whinging and bitching. but just walk away. Do not go to your car, and don't go home if they're following you, because they're slimy gits, and you'll just get an FPN through the post, and there'll be all sorts of lies on it. Especially if you've not actually said nothing on camera. They'll still make it up, and they'll probably still try and say, oh well, he said, she said, and all this, and hoping that they'll still get the 75 quid out of you. If they threaten to call the police, let them. In fact, if they're really argumentative with you, you call the police. After all, they're exhibiting threatening behaviour towards you. If the police turn up, they've got no power to compel you to provide your details to Kingdom Security, and they've got no power to compel you to give them your details to themselves. And if you are a nice person and you do decide to cooperate with the police, you know, and say something along the lines of, I'll tell you my name but I'm not giving it to them, if the police then hand that information over, it's a breach of data protection. If you do talk to Kingdom Security, do not confirm your identity if asked. If they get your name and address and they say, can you verify who you are, as I just said a few seconds ago, just say no. It's not your job to help them issue a penalty against you. If they accuse you, we're still not quite in a third world tin pot dictatorship. If they accuse you, the onus is on them to prove the accusation. The onus is not on you to defend yourself if they've accused you. If they do approach you, they can talk to you, but they can't stop you from continuing walking or whatever. If they say, can we just have a moment with you, whatever, just ignore them, walk off. You can even say no if you want, but by then I would imagine you've said, I don't want to talk to you. And if you do say, well, we just seen you doing this, or dropping that, say, I'm exercising my right to silence, I don't want to talk to you, go away. And they just ignore them as if they weren't there. It's not difficult. And what you have to remember as well, that is Kingdom Security are in many counties now. Lots of councils have contracted them. There's 5 councils out of 6 in North Wales got these scumbags on the books. And it's just not healthy at all. In North Wales, there's hardly a person anywhere who doesn't know someone who hasn't been affected by Kingdom Security. They used to say that about cancer. You know, everyone somewhere, there was an advert for cancer a while back, everyone somewhere knows someone who's been affected by cancer. Kingdom Security is a cancer in North Wales, and it wants cutting out. They're only supported by bent decision makers in the council. Most people believe that a lot of these council officials are being bribed in order to give the contracts. There's no earthly reason why these people should even get the contracts. It doesn't clear up the mess. If you drop litter, or your dog does a big dump on the pavement, and they come up to you and accuse you of it because you've just walked away, they can issue their FPN, a justifiable one that is. They can issue that, but the dog mess still remains on the pavement. No one cleans it up. The litter you just dropped is still blowing down the street. So the problem isn't solved. They just get 75 quid out of you. These people take most of the money. Some of these councils are only getting 5%. And Kingdom Security is pocketing all the rest. And in small, tight-knit communities, they're taking that money out of the system. And it's going into the pockets of their bosses, and they're getting a little bit of a back in bonuses. In North Wales, there's a particular problem. And say I'm based in North Wales, and we want these terrorists off our streets. And that's what they are, the terrorists. They're violent thugs. As I said, 5 or 6 counties in North Wales are currently contracting them. They've affected the lives of thousands of people, and the knock-on effect to thousands of more who've never had any contact with these scumbags. But in North Wales, we've got a very good Facebook group. It's particularly active, and it's called North Wales Against Kingdom Security. If you're on Facebook, look it up. By all means, feel free to join. If you've been a victim of Kingdom, post any pictures you have of them, make any comments. They're always welcome. The more information we get on these gangsters, the better. And currently, there's a petition going around. It's based in North Wales, aimed at these 5 counties who are employing these vermin, contracting these vermin, and we're trying to get them out. So if the petition details will be below the video when it's on YouTube, so you can just click on the link and it'll take you straight to it. Please sign and share it. Try and get a few of your friends to share it. The more the merrier. It's going to get presented to the 5 councils anyway. The Facebook group is working exceptionally hard, gathering information and evidence against these gangsters. And as I say, we're going to try and get them out. If we can achieve that, and it's not impossible, we already know that the company is very, very wary of this group, and it's suffering as well because it's having recruitment problems and all this. If we can get them out in North Wales, we can get them out anywhere. And while we're starting in North Wales, we'd like these people driven out of the whole of the country. They've got no place in civilised society. They are scum. And the people who've been involved in the contracting process, bringing them into our communities to terrorise everyone, they need to be asked serious questions as well. As I say, please feel free to look up the group, join it by all means, sign and share the petition. That would be brilliant. It'll be running for a few weeks. And as I say, hopefully these tips I've given will be useful for you. Don't be intimidated by these thugs. They're just vermin. Treat them like you would a rat. Just stamp on them, because they certainly want exterminating. And until my next vid, thanks very much for listening.